Hey there, everybody. It is me, Chris Herman, here for another episode of On Deck. Today we have Charlotte Cartaya. Charlotte is an automotive sales manager for Effective here in South Florida, and she oversees a team of account executives who are currently working very hard to help dealers across South Florida market and advertise their business in the world of video, whether that be through traditional cable or OTT. I think our dealer clients and friends will get a lot out of listening to this conversation because I found it extremely informative in regards to how important it is to understand that video, whether it be traditional or digital, is moving to more of an audience selected style of media delivery. I hope I said that the right way. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this one. I bring you Charlotte Cartaya. Charlotte,
right.
How are you?
Wonderful. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing very well. Charlotte Cartaya.
Yes, sir.
How did I do with that one?
You did very well.
Thank you.
A lot better than others.
I appreciate it. Well, Charlotte, you are on deck. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today, Chris.
You're welcome. For those of you watching and listening, Charlotte is an automotive sales manager for Effective. And for those of you that are not sure, well, what is Effective? Effective was Xfinity. Xfinity was Comcast. So by circumnavigation, Effective is the new, not so new, it's been a couple years now, this new brand name for Comcast. So again, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you again. Thank you for having me.
I'm
Look
looking
forward to this.
Great. Me too. Let's jump right in.
All right.
Of course, most people in our industry are already familiar with Effective, and most of our clients and many people in the automotive industry, I would presume, over the years have used Effective in some form, whether it be more of the traditional cable side or now, within the last few years, more of the digital OTT side. Mm-hmm. You come to the retail automotive space within, let's say, the last year or so, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
But you've been exposed to retail automotive on tier 1 and tier 2 for some time.
Correct.
I'd be curious to start off. Tell me a little bit about the tier 1, tier 2 experience, and then we'll maybe we can talk about your transition into the trenches of tier 3.
Into the weeds.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So it's definitely been night and day with dealing with tier 1 and tier 2 automotive. You look at a more broad scope. We look and see audiences, not into like the lower funnel, more of a branding message. And it's been where you're consistent all throughout the year. So we'll look at just like an in-market for a Toyota, or just they have bought Toyota in the past. So to continue to conquest that market and that audience. So, and just all throughout the year, very to the T, simple campaigns, having that message out there, making sure they're top of mind. In
the tier 3 side, obviously, we try to do our best, and our clients try to do our best to plan on an annual basis or a quarterly basis, and then it's reactionary on a monthly basis. But as we know, it can be reactionary on a weekly basis, depending on how the business is. When you're at the tier 1 level, is there that type of disruptive change in the planning, or is it really laid out in a nice, more smooth and organized fashion?
It is laid out with a beautiful bow on it, if we want to say.
Right.
It's laid out on a more so annual basis. In between, we'll tweak as we need based on any reporting or any metrics that we've seen. But compared to tier 3, oh no. We can change it overnight if we have to. Right. Yes.
And on the tier 1 level, I guess it's safe to say you're dealing with agencies who are planning that. But when you're dealing with the tier 3 level, it's a combination of agencies and the actual dealerships that you might be working directly with, correct?
Yes, you're doing a very nice dance between both.
Right. How do you what's the difference what's the dance, if you will?
So with the agency, it's definitely about the data, making sure why it's important for their client and educating them throughout. Because we're really the partners with both agency and a client level. With a client direct that they're dealing with, who knows how many other partners, dealing with their own internal staff, making sure that their profits are increasing month over month, day over day. You have to get to the weeds. It's like I always say, you want to talk to them short, sweet, to the point, and what they want to hear to help them grow their business. Because that they have 15 minutes of their time because they're running 1,000 miles an hour. So that's what I think I would say between both of those.
So we were talking before we started here, and your husband's in the automotive business,
Yes.
and had indicated to you, mentioned that he indicated, you're going to end up in automotive at some point in time, and you have now. And we talked about that. Tell me perhaps with some more detail of your experiences of being more exposed in the tier 3, because I know you said you really enjoy it. So I'm curious to get a little bit more insight from you about what it's like working with dealers.
Yeah, so it's funny. With him, he's a car accessory guy. So he knows all about the cars, and he would have dinner conversations. Like, all I hear is like the Snoopy, wah, 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 throughout dinner. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's interesting. But of course, I'm going through them all. I used to work with General Market at that point.
Right.
And now we talk about cars. I'm like, that's not the new one. This is the new one. Did you see this one? And I'm challenging him throughout their dinner conversation. And our 10-year-old's like, oh, but I like that one. And that's not a hybrid. And that's a gas. But we should do a diesel car because of gas. So it's really evolved throughout the entire family of like, now we've become this automotive family of conversation. And it has really changed, definitely. And
that's interesting, right? So now now you're on more of the same wavelength. You're speaking the same language, right?
Yes. And like what cars and what trucks, and it's just night and day between them. Now it's interesting when the lease is up or what the next car is. Now I definitely have more say on like, no, I like this one, or this is the one I'm looking at. Right. So it's been fun for them.
How about, your experience, now working more directly with dealers?
So with them knowing what I know and like what's happening, especially in today's day and age, it's just not wasting their time, especially that, with inventory or transitioning from a tier 2, tier 3, let's say, from a tier 1 to tier 2 to now tier 3, it's really hitting the ground running. What's happening in your dealership, which is it's independent compared to on a DMA or more of a national level. So it's really just shifting the conversations and becoming a partner with them, having like as if their business is my business.
That's the way that you've got to look at it. And I think that's the way, there's a lot of, and I've never been a fan of this terminology. You hear dealers say the term vendor a lot, and we as an agency get lumped into the vendor, category. As a media provider, there are times I'm sure that you get lumped into the vendor category. And I've never been fond of that term because I don't think that it adequately describes what is necessary to be successful in a relationship providing a service to a dealership, right? And what is necessary is a partnership.
Correct. Yeah. And I think that goes a long way. Being their partner, whether it's what media they're doing with me or what they're doing out there, is like, what is it working? It's important, like I mentioned, making sure their business is mine. So if I have specific clients, looking at their Instagram, looking at what they're doing on LinkedIn, looking at their events, how can I support you? How can I get your message out there? What are you posting on social media? Was that a good message? Or let's tweak it like this. There was a time last year, actually, one of my clients was hosting an event, and just very simple, something that you could have just fixed in 2 seconds. Their social media partner, unfortunately, the picture didn't really go out, and the phone number was cut off. And of course, the GM is not sitting there and looking at their social media posts and their stories. And I took a quick picture and said, send me the picture and I'll format it for you, fix it, and let's just re-upload it quickly because your event is in a week from now. It's launching the 2021 cars. Let's get this updated. And like, that's something as a partner you should look at as their whole media. What else are you doing so I can be there to help you? Right. So looking at that as a whole scope, it's important for me.
What you can do to be helpful in a number of areas, particularly now, because it's no secret in our industry. There's no chips, very few cars. Yep. Dealers have dialed back their marketing and advertising expense, understandably so. I know we both feel that they could be doing more to message now and think they should be, but they're dialed back, which means that, for yourself and your company, you have to find perhaps at this time smaller and more meaningful ways to be contributory, and to be helpful. And it might just be what you're talking about. Something that's completely out of your wheelhouse where you're just like, hey, we'll help out in any way to develop that partnership.
Absolutely.
Where, and like I said, we'll bounce around a lot. Where, some of your fundamental business skill set that you've acquired over the years, where did it come from? Like what drove you into this direction for a career?
It's funny. So my degree actually is in criminal justice. I started advertising at the newspaper company with the Miami Herald when I was 25 years old. And just the passion of seeing a small business owner, their marketing go in 3 months later, knowing that they were able to stay in business because of what we've done, it felt like I was helping them in many ways. So put my degree aside, and I just kept running with advertising. And what I saw was very much self-develop, having that passion, knowing I need to keep learning, I need to keep being challenged. For myself, it's just, I can't be bored. So I'm constantly trying to find ways how to self-develop and how to challenge myself. And with advertising, as you know, it changes on the minute, every minute, if we want even look at today's day with streaming and OTT. So I really felt that having that, I would always feel challenged. Fast forward 15 years per se, definitely don't want to age ourselves here. Fast forward, and it's like I have that passion still every day, and to know that I can help a business, a GM in this category per se, to tweak their message to today's day where it might be a chip shortage. So let's look at service. Let's look at helping if they're missing out on text. Let's look at recruitment messages. Knowing that it can change and we have to pivot, we pivot. But it's not the same 9 to 5, doing the same work every day.
Right.
I would go crazy.
All right, so I've already like an explosion of questions, but I'm gonna try and set the ones about the criminal justice thing aside, because that's intriguing me. And somehow looking at you, when you said that didn't surprise me. I don't know why, but when you said that, I was like, yeah, that seems to make sense, and I don't know why. But I want to come back to that. But let's stay on the advertising and marketing. So was your first job in the field with the Miami Herald?
My first job was as a coordinator. So I used to help the newspaper reps put in their orders for the 3x5, didn't have color, it was a black and white ad, no digital at that point.
Right.
And that was my first job, just coordinating
at the Herald?
At the Miami Herald.
For automotive or for all kinds?
Everyone.
For everyone.
Yeah. We didn't have divisions yet. So it was anybody and everyone. So I would deal with general market, automotive, and real estate. Right.
Did you work with Fran?
Yes, I certainly did. That was about 3 years later. I worked with Fran.
Fran Rosenthal. Yes. She was a powerhouse there.
Oh, I love her. You don't mess with Fran.
Right.
I worked with her 3 years after. Once we moved, I used to work in the Hialeah office, very small, remote.
Okay.
Then when we moved to downtown, we started separating offices. So with Fran, she handled the automotive, cars.com. Then we had real estate, and then general market.
Oh my God, I haven't thought of her name in some time. I really like Fran. I mean, if you know Fran and you appreciate what Fran's about, then of course you're just like, she's just awesome.
She's to the point. You know how Fran is feeling.
No BS, would go in and sit down with any dealer, it didn't matter who, and just be like,
yep.
You know, awesome. Okay, well, what a cool coincidence that there's that connective tissue in our conversation. So you start off, you're helping out, and as you're moving along, take me along, and then we're going to come back to Effective and some of the cool stuff that you guys offer dealers, but I'm always more interested in hearing the personal story.
Absolutely. Started the newspaper as a coordinator, then from there moved to the downtown, which is where I met Fran, was promoted to their digital media specialist. At that point, we were just starting banner ads. The Miami Herald had their website. They had just launched Miami.com.
Yes.
So we were doing sponsor ad, helped really develop and see placements. So all about the back end. A few years, I was there for 15 years, actually 12 and a half. Started to then do business development. That's when we started doing Yahoo, behavioral targeting, all the digital world. Became Google Analytics certified. That's when it really started to evolve to what digital was. Understanding like uniques and the page views, and at that point was started to go out with clients and help educate from newspaper, the shift, very much the shift that we're at today.
Right.
Educate what the newspaper was and how we're moving toward digital space. What do you mean digital? Nobody goes online. What is behavioral targeting? So educating the client as well as the account executive through the transition and having those partnerships with all the different media partners, whether it's a Yahoo or different programmatic exchanges as well. So just learning the back end, putting like my geek hat on and just learning that, like, what is our cost for that and how do we upsell and what's our cost and what are we actually getting? Where's the data coming from? What does the reporting look like? How does it help our clients? So it really evolved in the last 3 years that I was there to a digital company per se.
And I can tell by how you're explaining it, you enjoyed it. This was exciting for you.
Yep. And that's where I realized, like, I like this space. I like the digital media. I like knowing the audiences and knowing how it has changed and it continues to evolve, and how we can target, and so many different ways to target a person, whether contextual content, retargeting them, just so many different ways. So it was definitely fun. And that's where when I started with what used to be Comcast, now Effective, I came on board as their interactive, we would call it digital interactive media specialist, and helped our teams very much the same as what I used to do, coach, educate them on how TV's becoming digital, the new OTT space, how it's the wild, wild west, because it certainly is the wild, wild west to today's day, and how do we really stand apart with our solution.
Interesting that you've had two, let's call it sort of similar parallel experiences, where you start off at the Herald in traditional, and you're able to be part of their transition into digital, which I always thought, the newspapers, they had a gun to their head. Like, they had to make that transition fast and furious, right? Yeah. I mean, if there was any, type of property in the traditional media space that had to make a shift, it was the newspapers, right? And I think they did. I mean, I think overall they made that shift pretty well, considering the pressure that was on them. So you got to be front and center to that, which I would imagine, being inside the four walls of the Herald, had to be at some high stakes at that time.
Yep. And then dealing with subscribers, once you turn on that paywall, it's for them having to have all this free content for so many years online to not have to pay. That was a tough transition for them. And are we going to lose subscribers? How can we keep them happy? Where's the medium? Do we just keep our top stories free, and just if you start digging in, then we start to pay? So it was tough. It was some great, some highs, some lows, but it changes. You go to the Wall Street Journal, you have to pay for it.
Right.
Everywhere across the board, you want good content. Editorial's expensive.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, there are fixed and variable expenses that go into running every business. It can't be for free.
Absolutely.
So then you come to Comcast, and you're kind of in a similar role, watching as the cable space moves from, let's call it traditional cable, into digital streaming and OTT, and that, I would say, probably is a similar but maybe even more difficult experience in trying to get people to understand what that really means, right? Yep. Do you find to this day that there's most conversations when you talk about OTT, right? Over the top. What is that? I mean, most people don't know what that means, right? Even though they do it every day, they don't know what it means, and you have to educate a lot, don't you?
Yep. And it starts from internal. It's like what we always say in the traditional world, frequency sells, right? We have to constantly remind ourselves and educate ourselves, what does OTT mean? And it's like we say, it's that space that it's extremely fragmented. Where do we play a role, and how do we navigate through it? So internally, it's always been about, here's our solution. It's not about what's us versus them. It's what we bring to the table. And that's been important for the teams to really understand and be confident in what we bring to the table.
So specifically, what do you bring to the table?
We bring to the table, Chris. Thank you for asking. It's really bringing that data that we bring to the table. It's bringing those audiences and how we can customize to the client's needs, whether it's from general market to automotive. It's knowing who's their audience, knowing we have our set-top box, knowing that we can capture that information and translate it to our client's needs, goals, and even just a new client that has never done advertising. What's happening in the market? Where are consumers, and how are they watching TV? Because it truly is not that traditional TV anymore. It's really becoming like a digital TV.
So, for the uninitiated, and I'll do my best to explain this, and then you can brush me up around the edges. Because you have such large penetration into so many homes with your set-top box, which is basically your cable box, right? Yes, you are able to acquire data on your viewers through that, right? So information about the household from this, but then you're also layering that with data providers such as Polk and Experian, where you're able to, I don't know if it's to the IP or whatever, but you're able to layer this data to create pictures of individuals and audience segments that you can then.
Correct.
Was that, how did I do?
You're hired. Done. That's it.
Yes.
We have an opening for you.
All right.
Exactly that. We really create those segments for the audiences and completely customized for the client. Based on that information that we're capturing, we know how much time is spent on cable. We know how much time is spent on broadcast. We know how much time is spent on live versus streaming. You know, there's always been this misconception, we only want prime time. People only watch TV from 7 to 11. And the majority of the time, actually, they're watching outside of prime. So it's a great way to help our clients see what's happening. And then when we even peel it back just a tiny bit, we say, these are your areas, your zones, which is your neighborhood. Here's what's happening. You know, we see each neighborhood, we call them our zones, are night and day. Sometimes we see Miami actually has less streaming, less OTT than West Palm Beach. And sometimes you sit back, you're like, well, Miami's a younger demographic. And that's actually not what's happening in the market. So we have to really look at the data and see like what's happening out there. What's in this set-top box? What do we find? So in addition to Comcast, you know, we also insert into other cable providers, but we use this to help our clients see what's happening and better tweak their campaigns based on those campaigns, based on those recommendations.
When we were talking earlier, you said that the mix between, you know, if you've got a client that's spending $10,000 on a monthly basis, you know, the mix is 70-30, 60-40 in favor of traditional cable.
Correct.
As opposed to OTT. I would think that, you know, certainly most digital marketers now would think, well, no, that can't be, right? But it is. And what do you think is driving that still?
Yeah, so when we look at that, we look at it based on demographic. So your 18 to 34 is watching about 40% more streaming than 60% traditional. And it depends on the demographic. You have your older demographic that is spending still actually almost 25% on streaming, which that has been very eye-opening. We usually, before, used to think, forget it. The older demographic is only watching your traditional, and that's the only way we can capture them. And that's actually not the case. So when we pull everything and we look at the whole scope, traditional is still your live TV. I think traditional, I go back like to the bunny ears. But really your traditional TV, you have live sports. You have some consumers that still enjoy making sure it's 9 o'clock at night, tune into the TV, and they're going to watch it. Our house is very divided, our household. My husband, I'm not going to say he's younger than me, but just by a few months, is your traditional watcher. He will sit down, might be 8 o'clock at night, he'll put Discovery and whatever show it could be. It could be whether it's an animal Discovery or it's a plant show. He will sit there and watch it. Doesn't matter what it is. Then you have me that it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's in bed, done. I finally have 5 minutes and I'm going to stream because I'm going to use those 30 minutes to my advantage and watch exactly what I want to watch. So you have these households. You can't look at the demographic only. You have to know who is that audience, who's that person you want to reach, and make sure you're capturing them in multiple ways.
Night owl. Look at you,
I'm a night owl for sure.
Wow.
Yes.
What time do you wake up?
Now, well, my son is very confused. My 2-year-old is still...
Yeah. Tell me about it.
So I'm up by 6:45, 7, exercising and keep going. And then online working from home. So I will be logged in by 8:15. Any
nap during the day? Or you?
Oh, no, I can't nap.
Really? So no. You don't require a lot of sleep?
No, I've just always been like that.
Oh, that's great. I got to get like 7 or 8 or I'm just all sorts of wrong.
Oh, no. I will be Googling random things at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
How to make a turkey, or we're coming close to Thanksgiving, so it's like, what are the best recipes? Yes.
But your example is one that fits many households, which is, it's not like 1954 where everybody sits down. It's like, okay, it's now time for the family to sit down. We're going to turn on the program and watch this show together, right? Everybody does the same thing. Now everybody's on their own deal. And they might be, they're connecting in different ways. They're watching different things. And that's what's happening. So what we were talking about before is just sort of the basic concept that whether you want to call it cable or OTTV, are you down with OTT? You know, it's video on screens.
Yeah, it's still your video. It's still that premium content.
Right.
On their time. Like we always say, it's video on anyone's time, on their time. It's still your content. It's still those premium networks, whether it's a Bravo, an HGTV, and even streaming sports. Is still considered OTT.
You know, in our business, you know, and you know this too. I mean, those of us that have been doing this for some time, in our agency, my career history was, started off in traditional, and we became digital along the way. Now we do both. But we still do a good bit of traditional advertising for our clients, and it's sort of like, it's this taboo word, almost like, oh my God, traditional.
I don't do that.
Oh, I just can't do that. And I will say that in lots of markets, major metros, stores that are, stores that sell 150 cars in a major metro, there's a good chance they don't need to do any traditional. They can have tons of digital, they can have some OTT or whatever, some digital video, what have you. Not everybody needs to do traditional, but this whole thought that like, that there's no need for what you would call traditional advertising to support a digital strategy, I think is total nonsense. Mm-hmm. And you look at here in South Florida, we've got some big automotive players, have had for years, whether it's the Bramans, whether it's, South Motors, whether it's Rick Case, whether it's Coral Springs Auto Mall. These are all big operations that do tons of digital that still find a way and need a way to reach the mass public as a whole to say, hey, here's who we are, here's what we got, here's what we're selling, come check us out, right?
Absolutely.
BrandSmart does it, City Furniture does it, McDonald's does it, Apple does it,
Facebook does
right?
it.
Facebook does it. This whole notion that everything that it can be that it should only be 100% digital is still nonsense. And I would argue, to your point that we were making before, that it's not digital and traditional. It's not anymore. It's video, it's display, it's audio. And those styles of messaging, whether you're talking about graphic design, which would be your old newspaper or billboards, or now display ads, right, or social posts, audio, which used to be radio, which now can be Pandora or a podcast, right, or video, which used to be TV, which is now OTT. It's now, it's everything under the sun.
Yep.
That's what it is. It's not digital or traditional. It's just different style, these same core styles of messages being pumped down a zillion different channels. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to get away from this whole digital traditional thing, because I don't think it plays anymore.
Yep. And that's a great thing with how the traditional mindset and media it's evolved and it's continuing to evolve to today's day, where we're looking at that information that we're capturing from the set-top box and seeing how much time is being spent. What networks are we targeting? Like we were discussing earlier, we might have 15 networks come Q1 that might be completely different in Q3. Why? What sporting events are happening? What programs are premiering that quarter? So back then, your traditional was, I want these 5 networks, news and sports, and I need to be on air 7 to 11, and what are my ratings and how many spots, and that's it. That was traditional. And that has really evolved to a digital TV where you're capturing networks that you would have never thought about. But the viewership is there because X, Y, and Z show is now airing, and we would have missed that audience.
Mm-hmm. And that's what it's all about now. Audience.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you trying to speak to? Yep. We've got the data that says how to reach them.
Correct.
Right? That's not there's no like, well, how do I want these types of people, how do we reach them? We know how to reach them. Mm-hmm. Now it's just about picking the right audience, which is one of the things in the world of OTT, right? Everybody's got their secret sauce. We've got the data. We've got the audience. We've got this. We've got that. And they're all compelling to different degrees. But to your point, again, referencing our conversation, we talked a lot before. But you guys, as the cable provider, have the carrier agreements with, safe to say, more programming? Educate me there.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do is the same way we used to do on our traditional side. We have the carriage right agreements. So with all these networks, like let's just say a Bravo. I'm a Bravo fan. I love my Housewives.
Okay.
That is my unplug from the world.
Yeah.
We have these agreements with these networks that we are guaranteed X amount of impressions on the OTT side, just like we're guaranteed X amount of live spots on each network. So that's a great thing with what Comcast, now Effective, we are able to capture in our OTT solution. It's knowing that before it gets into this direct deals or like this programmatic space, is that we have this inventory before anyone else does because of these agreements that we've had for many years, 10 to 15 years.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Do you enjoy it? I mean, I that's a dumb question. I think you clearly do. What do you enjoy most about what you do?
It's many different parts. Like internally for the team, since I now manage 7 AEs, it's seeing how I can kind of get them out of their comfort and challenge them, and knowing where they have the opportunity to strengthen their pitch or just themselves. And it's like you feel like they're your children.
Right.
Yes, you did this. Good job. But I've seen how they've struggled, throughout it. And then now I'm like, I got this information. I got it now. It's like I tuned in and now I understood. So I love to see that. I love to be there by their side and help coach them to get to where I know they could be. I have some team members that are now recording themselves and sending videos to their clients and are confident of their OTT acumen. And even if a client asks, well, what's the difference between you and this person? And what do you have? They're like, oh, call me. It's fine. I'll answer any questions you have. Back 6 months ago, a year ago, they were like, I'm not doing it. We need somebody to help me. I need help answering these questions. So I love seeing that. I love seeing that they've challenged themselves, they've plugged in, we've partnered together, and seeing them grow in this space, especially in the OTT space. This is very new. I say very new, but it's been around for 3 to 4 years. But now it's like where it's front and center. And then on the client side, seeing the client see results, whether it's through their Google Analytics report, seeing more direct on organic traffic, seeing their bounce rates have gone down, more of a quality traffic, geography. You barely see China on there because we know our set-top box. We know where it's landing.
Right.
Seeing them have that and just like, I get the OTT. I get this, so I want more of this, and I want to make sure I'm on my live sports and having that audience campaign. That's great to see that for the client and knowing that we've helped them along the way. That's
great. Going back to managing your team, 2 questions, and I'm sorry if I asked this earlier or in the previous conversation. What's the geographic region that your team is covering right now?
South Florida.
Okay, so what we would call that Dade Broward or
Correct.
Dade Broward Palm
West
Beach?
Palm Beach down. Nothing West Palm Beach.
Nothing West Palm Beach.
Correct.
Okay, so all right.
All the way to Monroe County. We have to go all the way to the Keys.
Okay. So do you find in managing 7 account executives who are all, all retail automotive at this point in time, right?
Correct.
But do you find that there are differences geographically in how people are thinking about this? Where if you've got people working in Broward, and you got people working in Dade, and you got people working in the heart of Dade when you get down into Kendall and Homestead and stuff like that. Is there a difference in terms of how dealers are responding to what you're sharing with them geographically, even within the 2 counties here?
The only difference I would say is the Hispanic market. That is the main difference. Everyone else is very similar on the audience and who we're targeting and the reception of who we are. Then you throw in the Hispanic market. I only want to reach, it's a very siloed market. I'm Hispanic and I understand it. And they feel like, with TV, we can't capture the Hispanic market. It's only on certain other medias. So it's helping that GM per se or agencies show how Hispanics are consuming content and video. So
are you sort of alluding to the fact that Hispanic dealers might still think that the only way to reach their customers are with like Univision or Telemundo or Hispanic radio? Or
correct.
Yeah, like the big three, right? Yeah.
Yep. And we see, especially now, the generations have changed.
Right.
You're now trying to reach a second generation. Like I think of my husband. He kills me when we were trying to watch on Netflix Money Heist.
Okay.
And he's like, I can't deal with these shows that I have to like read it because it's a whole different language. No. And I'm like, okay, let's put it on Spanish. I need to work on my Spanish. Anyways, like I will not watch something in Spanish. And that's his primary language. And the second generation does not. They're watching content in English, reading content in English, and that's that generation that has changed.
But what is that, right? I mean, do you feel the same way as for yourself as well too? Are your parents first generation like?
My dad is first generation. My mom's second generation.
Okay.
And I think it's once they've started to speak the language, like it's not they don't want to go back, but they're starting to feel comfortable with the English language.
So what language was spoken in your home when you were a child?
Spanish.
Yes.
100%. 100%. And if it wasn't spoken back, you're not getting what you were asking for.
It's so great, because my household is similar in the sense that my wife, speaks Russian.
Okay.
And she only speaks Russian to the kids, and the kids speak Russian to her. Mm-hmm. I speak English to the kids speak English to me, and my wife and I speak English to each other, although I understand a little bit of Russian.
Okay.
But I certainly understand the importance from her perspective of maintaining that language, because, and we're already seeing this with our daughter going to preschool, even though it's primarily Russian students there.
Okay.
They're teaching a lot of English, and that's what she's learning there. And it's an effort to make sure that language sticks.
Yep. Our 10-year-old, before he started VPK fourth, he only spoke Spanish at home. And once he started school and he learned the English language, it's hard for him to speak Spanish. He actually tells my mother-in-law, "You need to learn English." And she's like, "Oh, no, sweetheart, I'm too old to learn English." So it's just they get comfortable, and that's what they speak it all the time, through school, through sports, through activities.
But your husband speaks Spanish.
Yes.
But he wants to watch programming in English.
In English, yeah. And we speak to the children in English. Our youngest, which will be 2 now in November, we're only trying to speak Spanish to him. So that way he gets the language, because we know once you start school, you start English and you lose it. And we don't want them to lose that, being able to speak Spanish.
It's so interesting. So not only is your family dynamic like many, in the sense that you have completely different media consumption habits between you and your husband, but you also have different language habits in the same home, right? So people think that it's just so easy, right? So to your previous point, okay, Mr. Dealer in South Dade, who says, I need to be on Univision or Telemundo to reach the Hispanic market, to which you would say, well, that's utter nonsense. I'm a Hispanic home. We're dual language in the home. My husband watches English program. I'll watch this. And neither one of us are watching Univision or Telemundo. I'm not saying you don't.
Yeah.
But that's not the primary way to reach you, a Spanish-speaking household in South Florida.
Yeah, correct. And throw in my mother-in-law in the mix. We have an in-laws quarter. And it definitely separated.
Right.
All of us together, but you have your own area. Once we got her hooked onto like Netflix and like where she can speak to the control, because the control now understands Spanish. The world has changed.
Right.
It's forget it. So we go on demand, and I'll have like Coco Melon, some novela on there. I'm like, who's watching this? I'm like, oh, that's right, my mother-in-law. Da 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 da, and she's speaking to the control already.
Right.
So she's watching. It's our generations are changing, and how they're consuming, because it's becoming easier for them.
In both directions, right? The older generation, which was probably deeply rooted in the traditional programming, right? And I'm not super familiar with the telenovelas and all, these like certain programming, right? And now your mother-in-law is like, she's starting to branch out
this
into
new world.
See, that's the thing. Marketing is so complex, and anybody thinks that, this is what we need to reach the Anglo audience. This is what we need to reach the urban audience. This is what we need to reach the Hispanic audience. No, which again, circling back to effective, proves the point that it's no longer about specific programming. It's about audience curation, and then letting the data determine when and where. Yep. Because you just don't know.
Exactly. And that's where you let it speak for itself. What are they watching?
We've solved it. We've solved marketing.
We'll sell this series. $9.99.
That's right. Okay. You can get it on our website in about 45 minutes. Okay. Now that we've solved marketing, let's circle back, because I'm curious. Hang on. Let me check my confidence monitor, as Greg. That's my clock that I'm supposed to look at to pay attention, which I never do. Let's talk about this criminal justice thing. I don't know why that didn't surprise me. There's something about your energy, about your presence, that indicates a sort of a seriousness that it didn't surprise me that you said this. So was there law enforcement in your family? What drew you to that?
Whatsoever. No law enforcement, actually. Everybody ran from law enforcement, probably. Nothing. I was always intrigued of like any mysteries. I can watch every murder show, like how to create a murder.
Right.
I mean, how they're built and their profiles, and I just love that. I was always about solving that problem, and I think it actually translates to where I'm at today. I'm like, what's the problem? How do we solve it? Where do I connect the dots? And here's your solution. And I think for me, with the day, it was like, okay, this is it. This is where I want to do it. So when you go through the program, I went to Miami-Dade College for my AA. My associate's before my bachelor's, and it's called a ride along. So you actually ride along with a police officer. You have to do 4 per quarter or per semester. And we arrived first to the murder scene. Like somebody got ran over in the 112.
Okay.
It was unfortunately a Homestead person that was trying to cross and got hit by a car. And that day I was like already thinking like 1,000 different things. I'm like, no, they were on this or they were doing this. Like I was already trying to solve this murder scene. And the police officer, like, you're here just for a grade. Like, that's all. Don't worry about it. Please don't dirty your shoes. Go to the side and you get your credit. I'm like, no, I need to be here. I need to find out what's happening. And I was like, I have to finish this program. It was just, I loved it. Fast forward, I started advertising. Like, I'm getting this rush of knowing an advertiser, the challenges, the comeback, the advertiser's a sassy one that knows, I know my advertising, I have it solved, and just educating them, but still having the opportunity to show them and uncover the questions that we need to know. Here's your solution, or here's the mystery solved. So that's where I'm at. But it's I finished my degree. I have it there. I don't think I'll go to it now. Having children definitely will not become. I always wanted to do investigation, but yeah, definitely not now. No, knowing the advertising side, how fun and challenging,
dynamic it is.
Yeah.
And you are South Florida born and raised, correct?
Yes, sir. Born and raised.
What if you were to communicate your feelings about South Florida and what you've seen over, let's call it the last 10, 15, 20 years, how has it changed for you? Because it's really grown and developed down here.
Mm-hmm. For me personally, since my son's 10, I have really slowed down and become more family oriented.
Right.
It has changed to where before I was like, what neighborhood, and does it matter the neighborhood? Here's where we need to be at. And now having a 10-year-old, it's all about like, what area are we in? What neighborhood? What schools? Like, let's slow down. So we live in an area that it's like time has stopped. The kids are outside bike riding. We're riding around the golf carts, or we're going to all the sporting events. So that's where it has really evolved for me, just stopping down, because it has become so crazy out here compared to where we were 15 years ago.
Right.
I remember with high school and going into college. I mean, it has just fast forward by 1,000 miles of how many people have moved down, and just, it's kind of crazy. Yeah,
it's exploding, and it continues to do so. And I think culturally it has become more interesting and more diverse, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I remember, and I've been in South Florida for some time, and when I first got here, it was South Beach, and it was like that. It was just like, that was kind of like the cool. That was the thing, and everything was trying to sort of fit into this like cool hip South Beach bucket, right? And now, at least from my involvement, right, I know it was more than that, but that was the big picture painted to the world, right? You didn't hear a lot about like, different eclectic bistro restaurants. You didn't hear a lot about like yoga or alternative like spiritual communities and stuff like that, right? But now all that stuff is really
all
perked
these different
up.
Districts.
Yes.
It's like, if you're a local, not to go to South Beach.
Right,
That's
exactly.
like the last place you want to go to. And so you hear like, before it's like Wynwood. I would not drive around there. Are you crazy? When we used to work in downtown at the Miami Herald building, I was like, oh, no. That's only if like I-95, there's an accident. You have to then drive through Wynwood. And now we take the kids out. They have great nights there. If they have like a food truck event, or there's an artist there. I mean, we just go with the family, and especially now in our Miami winter, that you can go out there and have it and enjoy the night. Yeah.
Yes, the Miami winter. We got a little taste of it the other day. It started warming up again today, but it was cool.
Yes.
All right, I'm jumping around again. Going back now, I'm gonna stitch your criminal background, your love of media, and your Florida repertoire. Did you watch Dexter? Were you a Dexter fan?
Yes, I was. I started to watch it. I have to finish.
You didn't finish it?
No. So that's the worst thing. Like, I don't like starting to watch a show and then not finishing.
Right.
But now it's like, it's just so, I don't have time.
Right.
And then like you start adding shows to your queue, and it's been really hard to select. Then you hear like this new one, like I just heard over the weekend, you have to watch Yellowstone. So I started to watch some, like, okay, now I'm hooked on this. You came back out, or it's like a new wife. So I'm my queue is all over the place.
I've been a little bit all over the place too. My mom turned me on to Yellowstone.
Okay.
And I started watching it this summer when my wife and kids were away. I started getting into it. I was like, oh, it's awesome. It's so great. And then, we came back and life happened, and we really haven't dug into any serious. So I understand. And the thing is, Dexter is kind of like, it's like 10 years old now. Yeah. I mean, it's 10 to 50. It's an older show at this point in time. I wonder how it stands up, but it was great.
Another good one, like something similar, The Sinner, or you have You. I mean, I love that type of shows or the documentaries, like, and then you think behind the person's mindset. I'm like, where were they before? What triggered it?
Right.
Oh yeah, those are good.
Good stuff. Good stuff. What questions do you think should be asked of you in regards to what you do that often don't? Like when you sit down, and we'll kind of like wrap it back to effective, and then maybe we'll unfortunately segue out of our this conversation. But these conversations are open-ended. They go for a long time, maybe just not all right here. If we come back to effective and working with dealers, and currently, with the state that we're in with the industry, when you sit with dealers or when you sit with your team, what are the questions that are not getting asked that you think should be getting asked? Are there any?
From the team to the dealers, or from the dealers to the team?
The dealers to the team. Like, what are they maybe not getting that would be helpful to them?
Yeah, I think there's times that we just don't have the opportunity to have a questionnaire or have an open forum to let's dive into what's happening or how can we help you, because sometimes some dealers know what they want and need and feel like this is the answer, versus like, okay, let's spend a good 30 minutes. Just give us 30 minutes and let's dig into, I know right now, unfortunately, with inventory and the chip shortages, how else can we promote your brand? We know people are moving into South Florida. How are you reaching them? Let's look into your GA. Are you looking at conversions? What are you looking at that's important to you? What is your plan for the next year? Are we just going month by month and hoping that we continue this? How are your employees? How are your techs? Are you providing maybe a program for them to keep them loyal? Because we know right now techs are extremely hard to find in this market. So it's really just helping them as a whole business, not just here's your zones and here's where you need to be at. And we know there's an opportunity for more sales, but it's evolved and we need to help you as a partner in all aspects.
I think that's a good point to kind of, tie it up on, is that any one of us in this business, serving dealers, you hope for the type of relationship where you can have a meaningful dialogue back and forth, right? Where you can share, honestly about this works, that doesn't work, this helped us, this didn't help us. And that's essentially what you're telling me here, is that there's a strong desire on your part and your team's part to be able to have a conversation with the client that ultimately helps them and positions you as a partner committed to their success, regardless of what it means that you have to do.
Absolutely. And we have to prove ourselves. I'm sure there's many other partners out there trying to break in. So that's our role too, to prove ourselves. Like, we're here to help you. We're here to grow your business whatever way it is. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is by you letting us in. We're not going to be here and say, how's inventory? We know what the answer is to that.
Right.
I see on your website you have this. We know what the answer is to that. It's asking more in-depth questions to even get themselves thinking like, oh, you know what? Maybe that message will help us here. Or maybe if I look at this different angle of this audience, instead of just targeting that in market, right now I don't want somebody to walk in my dealership and tell them, I'm sorry, I don't have that model, and have them walk away. So it's really just helping ask questions and helping them think a little bit outside the scope.
Charlotte, that was great. I really enjoyed it. You bring a lot of intelligence, smarts, and class to the game, that's for sure. So thank you, for being here, spending some time with me. And I look forward to having further conversations with you.
Anytime. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.